Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the Spoken Greats podcast. We're going to be continuing with the second book in Meditations by Marcus Aurelius today. Today, I will be drinking a Paraje Los Horones Tempranillo 2022. I picked this up from Lidl the other week for $6.99. Now, if you don't know much about Tempranillo is the most popular grape grown in Spain. It's best known for going into Rioja, and actually looking at this label, although it says Castilla y León, going onto the back, I can see that it was made in Nauda, which is in the Rioja region. But it doesn't have the Rioja labeling, which would normally require that it's been aged as a minimum about 2 years. Although we see on the bottle it's from 2022, so we know that it has been aged for about 2 years, but part of that time will be at least a year in the barrel, and then even more if it has a Reserva or Grand Reserva label. So potentially we've landed ourselves a young Rioja for a cheaper price. So Tempranillo typically has hints of cherry to it, sort of dark cherry, fig. And it can have cedar or tobacco in its more complex forms, but that typically comes from a longer aging process in oak barrels. The other aspect of the Tempranillo grape is that it has a really thick skin, which means that it gives off a lot of tannins. Now, this makes it perfect for aging, so you can get some Riojas which can age up to 20 plus years and they'll be fantastic. In the case of this one, I actually opened this on Sunday, and a lot of the tannins were pretty harsh, so I just left it in a decanter, and I'm hoping that it will have mellowed out a bit more. So let's try it now. So yeah, I think it's definitely benefited from aerating for a bit. That's mellowed out some of those harsher tannins that were there on Sunday. It's got a bit of cherry. There's a little bit of cedar, not much else. But for $6.99, I think that's ridiculous value. But yeah, I would give it plenty of air. Tannins are a double-edged sword because whilst they're great for the preservation of the wine, when you want to drink it, clearly you want to subdue some of those tannins if they're too strong. So yeah, this has been aerated for quite a while. I wasn't sure whether this would still be okay to drink, to be honest. I thought maybe it would have oxidized fully by now. But yeah, still very palatable. And I think it was worth giving it those 4 or 5 days to wait. I'd happily eat that with a burger, a nice quick and dirty burger. I think that would be a lovely pairing with that. Please let me know in the comments what you'll be drinking with me today as we crack on with book 2. So Marcus Aurelius writes Meditations whilst on the campaign. He spent most of his reign as emperor on military campaigns, principally in Central Europe, in what would today be sort of Slovakia, that region historically known as Bohemia, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, that sort of area. And he was fighting a prolonged war with a people called the Quadi, who were living in that area. And that's worth bearing in mind. Sense of duty and protecting the empire is on the mind of Marcus, as he's spending most of his time away from his family, waging war on the edge of the empire. We start today with a meditation that Marcus wrote to himself. Funnily enough, it's called Meditations, but like a daily practice for you to consider when you're starting your day and the kind of people that you might encounter during the day. And this is known in Stoicism as premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evil. If you can anticipate bad things happening, then you will not feel those consequences as strongly, because you've already imagined them happening. And when you expect something to happen, the damage is less severe. That's the context to start with. Written among the Quadi on the River Gran. So that's when he's fighting the Quadi tribe up to where the river today is known as the River Hron in Slovakia, I believe. Say to yourself, first thing in the morning, today I shall meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, aggressive, treacherous, malicious, unsocial. All this has afflicted them through their ignorance of true good and evil. But I have seen that the nature of good is what is right, and the nature of evil what is wrong, and I have reflected that the nature of the offender himself is akin to my own, not a kinship of blood or seed, but a sharing in the same mind, the same fragment of divinity. Therefore I cannot be harmed by any of them, as none will infect me with their wrong, nor can I be angry with my kinsman or hate him. We were born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. So to work in opposition to one another is against nature, and anger or rejection is opposition. By mentally preparing himself for the kind of people that he's going to encounter in his day-to-day, he can remind himself to show some restraint. It's worth remembering, of course, that Marcus Aurelius had the power to put to death anyone who pissed him off. And so taking that exercise in mindfulness to be aware of people's shortcomings and see it as a natural part of them, and treating other humans as almost sacred, I suppose, probably helped him in exercising that restraint. If he comes in with the expectation, this is how people act, how can I be mad at them? How can I be mad at a dog for barking? Once you accept that people act according to their nature, and you know that it's in their nature, there's no other way for them to act. People generally believe that they're doing the right thing or they're doing something good. So if they are doing something against your values, then they're likely misguided. They're not doing it intentionally bad. They've just been guided down the wrong path. And Marcus here is reminding himself that it's his responsibility to cooperate with people and guide them onto the right path. Whatever it is, this being of mine is made up of flesh, breath, and directing mind. Now the flesh you should disdain, blood, bones, a mere fabric and network of nerves, veins, and arteries. Consider too what breath is, wind, and not even a constant, but all the time being disgorged and sucked in again. That leaves the third part, the directing mind. So here, Marcus is talking about his disdain for the material world. Everything is quite fleeting in terms of your body, and the only constant that you do have is your mind. Someone can cut your hand off, you can break your arm, your cells regenerate, but your mind is the constant that is with you. It's available to you at any time. Someone can bound your arms, they can gag your mouth, they could gouge your eyes out, but you still have your mind. That stays with you. Quit your books. No more hankering. This is not your gift. No, think like this, as if you were on the point of death. You are old. Don't then let this directing mind of yours be enslaved any longer. No more jerking to the strings of selfish impulse. No more disquiet at your present or suspicion of your future fate. So here he's talking about the Stoics' natural tendency towards action. Marcus is trying to enforce on himself bias towards taking action, because you can get too much sometimes into reading for reading's sake. And the Stoics believed in walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And ultimately, they're reminded of their mortality. And this is an impetus towards taking meaningful action, and also not living impulse to impulse like a simple animal. Ultimately, he sees himself here as having a duty to do. He has a battle to fight, a war to win. And so complaining about the harsh weather or the grim conditions of the camp, it doesn't serve them. Or worrying about whether he'll survive the war, it's not going to change the outcome. And his energy would be better spent on doing his duty. The works of the gods are full of providence. The works of fortune are not independent of nature, or the spinning and weaving together of the threads governed by providence. All things flow from that world, and further factors are necessity and the benefit of the whole universe, of which you are a part. Now every part of nature benefits from that which is brought by the nature of the whole, and all which preserves that nature. And the order of the universe is preserved equally by the changes in the elements and the changes in their compounds. Let this be enough for you and your constant doctrine, and give up your thirst for books, so that you do not die a grouch, but in true grace and heartfelt gratitude to the gods. So here Marcus is trying to remind himself about the nature of the universe and how everything stems from change. So change is a natural aspect of life. It's built into everything around us, and it's neither good nor bad. The Stoics would argue that it's all good because it's in accordance with nature. This is the consolation to death, I guess. It's just another process in that constant change of state. And here again, he's attacking his studies. He's spending too much time in his books and not enough time taking direct action. We can often postpone taking action with the justification that we don't have enough information. The reality is we'll never have all the information. We are, at best, making decisions with incomplete information, and that's the approximation that we're always working off. The benefit of having a bias to action, though, is that you're able to ascertain quickly what works and what doesn't, because you're constantly testing new actions. And when they don't work, you can adapt accordingly and change the action. Whereas if you're postponing all action until you can come up with a perfect decision, that decision may still be incomplete, but because you haven't tested it yet, you don't know that. And so the person who's constantly taking action and readjusting will run rings around someone who's deliberating constantly. Remember how long you have been putting this off, how many times you have been given a period of grace by the gods and not used it. It is high time now for you to understand the universe of which you are a part, and the governor of that universe of whom you constitute an emanation. And that there is a limit circumscribed to your time. If you do not use it to clear away your clouds, it will be gone, and you will be gone, and the opportunity will not return. I just can't help but think of, there's an episode of Rick and Morty where Morty is playing a simulation called Roy, which is basically like a video game simulating life. And he goes through this entire life, getting married, having kids, beating cancer, and then he goes back to working in the carpet store, to which Rick can't believe he does. And then he just dies randomly by falling off a ladder in the carpet store. And Marcus here is talking about the gift of life, having been given so many opportunities, and he's just squandering it. There's a great essay by Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, which we will cover at some point on the podcast. It's called The Shortness of Life. It's only about 30 pages, but it is a fantastic short book. And it just hits home how much of life that we waste. And we do. We take it for granted. Often we can be so stingy with our money, counting every last little penny and where it's going, but we'll freely squander away our time. So we would happily spend hours on hours collecting coupons to save a few pennies, when your time, even if it was on minimum wage, is worth much more than the time spent getting those savings. And the thing with time is, once it's gone, it's gone. Money comes and goes. You can always earn more. You can't get back your time. And this is the easiest question. Would you rather be old and rich or young and poor? I think most people would vote for young and poor, because you've got the future ahead of you. Every hour of the day, give vigorous attention, as a Roman and as a man, to the performance of the task in hand, with precise analysis, with unaffected dignity, with human sympathy, with dispassionate justice, to vacating your mind from all its other thoughts. And you will achieve this vacation if you perform each action as if it were the last of your life, freed, that is, from all lack of aim, from all passion-led deviation, from the ordinance of reason, from pretense, from love, of self, from dissatisfaction with what fate has dealt you. You see how few things a man needs to master for the settled flow of a God-fearing life. The gods themselves ask nothing more of one who keeps these observances. So he's imposing on himself that sense of duty again, of carrying out his duty objectively without giving way to an emotional judgment one way or the other, because lives depend on his variance of mood. And self-mastery is something that's available to everyone. You cannot guarantee that you will gain wealth in this life. You can't guarantee you will be the strongest, the fastest, the smartest. However, there is one battle which you alone are in control of, and that's the fight with yourself. If you can master your impulses, then you've conquered more territory than Alexander the Great, because the terrain of the mind is limitless. It's such a vast battle space on which we are day to day, moment to moment, conflicting with ourselves and being pulled in one direction or the other. So to master oneself is no easy feat. Self-harm, my soul. You are doing self-harm, and you will have no more opportunity for self-respect. Life for each of us is a mere moment, and this life of yours is nearly over, while you still show yourself no honour, but to let your own welfare depend on other people's souls. The Stoics talk so much about death, it's easy to get the impression that they're rather nihilist, but really they're the opposite. They talk about death so much just to emphasise how important life is. And yes, they talk about how everything is a fleeting moment, our existence is a mere blink in the eye, but I think they get the impression that life is too short to delay, to procrastinate, to put things off. But it's too long to be a nihilist. You've got to make use of the time you have, make a positive difference to the world, and do your duty. And that means pulling your weight. You can't depend on the life of others. And this is the reality. We depend on others for many things. But you have to do your best to pay it forward, to return the favour or pay it on to someone else, because you can't be a burden on everyone else. That, I think, here is what Marcus is getting at. There's no worse a shame than being a burden on everyone else. And if you're going to have self-respect, then you need to be able to carry yourself. Do externals tend to distract you? Then give yourself the space to learn some further good lesson and stop your wandering. That done, you must guard against the other sort of drift. Those who are dead to life and have no aim for the direction of every impulse, and more widely, every thought, are drivellers in deed as well as word. I think this is very relatable. We are living in a world now where we are constantly bombarded by external stimuli. We are always exposed to distractions, whether our phones, social media. We're just being bombarded with information from all sides. And some of the best data engineers in the world are harnessing these algorithms to capture and hold our attention for as long as possible, to the point where we never really have time to have a thought to ourselves. And then the second part to this, he's pointing out the other danger, which is aimlessness, just heading from one impulse to the next, whether that's just being sucked in from one TikTok or YouTube video into the next. It's just aimless pursuit of pleasures, excessive eating, wanking, drugs. Pick your vice and apply accordingly. He's advocating for moving away from that. And he's calling these people drivellers in word and deed. So someone who talks a lot of drivel makes no sense. And again, if you're aimless, then what you do and what you say makes no sense. It has no meaning. Failure to read what is happening in another's soul is not easily seen as a cause of unhappiness, but those who fail to attend to the motions of their own soul are necessarily unhappy. We see this all the time, don't we, with the lifestyles of the rich and the famous. They have everything that life could possibly provide to them, and yet they seem hell-bent on destroying their lives, mainly with cocaine or whatever poison they happen to choose. That's because their battle is not external. Their external world is irrelevant to their internal world. They are experiencing an internal struggle. And Marcus is using the soul as an example here, but you can substitute that with your consciousness, your inner monologue, whatever you find more comfortable to say. But it's being in tune with yourself. And if you don't attend to that burning voice in the back of your head, it's going to get louder and it's going to compound and things will get worse if you don't address it. And that is the source of pain for many people. Always remember these things, what the nature of the whole is, what my own nature is, the relation of this nature to that, what kind of part it is of what kind of whole, and that there is no one who can prevent you keeping all that you say and do in accordance with that nature, of which you are a part. There's always a choice. The Stoics advocate for integrity in all circumstances, and by the Stoics' reckoning, it is better to die with integrity to yourself than it is to live a lie. If you were to put a gun to someone's head and force them to do something, the Stoics would say that you did not force them to do anything. They chose to do the action because they did have a choice. They could have chosen to have their brains blown out. You could argue that's an extreme take, but that's what the Stoics believed. No one can force you to do anything. Anything which you are supposedly being forced to do, you have taken a conscious decision that the alternative is worse and you don't want the alternative. In the case of changing your principles in order to live, you have deemed that you care more about living than you do about your principles. In his comparative ranking of sins, applying philosophy to the common man's distinctions, Theophrastus says that offences of lust are graver than those of anger, because it is clearly some sort of pain and involuntary spasm which drives the angry man to abandon reason, whereas the lust-led offender has given in to pleasure and seems somehow more abandoned and less manly in his wrongdoing. Rightly then, and like a true philosopher, Theophrastus said that greater censure attaches to an offence committed under the influence of pleasure than to one under the influence of pain, and in general, the one is more like an injured party, forced to anger by the pain of provocation, whereas the other is in his own source of the impulse to wrong, driven to what he does by lust. I suppose the line that Marcus is trying to take here, Freud came up with a similar notion that people either pursue things or move away from something else. So they're either moving away from pain or fear or moving towards reward or pleasure. And Marcus here is arguing that at least when someone is trying to prevent some kind of harm to them, whereas pursuing something that's purely of their own volition, they have chosen to go down that path. So he's quite a harsh guy. There's a lot of admirable traits in Marcus Aurelius, but I don't think he'd be a very fun guy to hang around with. He's maybe the guy you'd want as a leader. He's less likely to be corrupt. But if I was going to have a pint with anyone, it would be with Seneca. I will get on to Seneca at another date, but Seneca was a lot more fun and showed that you can be a Stoic and enjoy life as well. Christ. Now here's a quote to remember next time you're stuck in traffic. You may leave this life at any moment. Have this possibility in your mind in all that you do or say or think. Now, departure from the world of men is nothing to fear, if gods exist, because they would not involve you in any harm. If they do not exist, or if they have no care for humankind, then what is life to me in a world devoid of gods or devoid of providence? But they do exist, and they do care for humankind. And they have put it absolutely in man's power to avoid falling into the true kinds of harm. If there were anything harmful in the rest of experience, they would have provided for that too, to make it in everyone's power to avoid falling into it. And if something cannot make a human being worse, how could it make his life a worse life? So the Stoics have varying beliefs when it comes to God, but generally they seem to be on the deist side of things, not necessarily explicitly believing in a particular god, such as Jupiter or Mars, but in some sort of higher being. And throughout meditations, this is used interchangeably as gods, nature, the universe. There's the idea that everything happens according to the laws of the universe. We might see this today as the laws of physics. And so if it can happen, then it's following the laws. So there's nothing inherently wrong with that in itself. It's just our judgments of those things. So in a sense, nothing really bad can happen to you. The nature of the whole would not have been blind to this, either through ignorance or with knowledge unaccompanied by the power to prevent and put right. Nor would it have made so great an error through lack of power or skill, as to have good and bad feeling indiscriminately on good and bad people alike. Yes, death and life, fame and ignominy, pain and pleasure, wealth and poverty, all these come to good and bad alike. But they are not in themselves either right or wrong. Neither, then, are they inherently good or evil. It's worth remembering when we think about the injustices of the world, when we think about how can bad things happen to good people and how can good things happen to bad people. But the inverse is also true. Good things happen to good people and bad things do happen to bad people. If it's a universal and it's not exclusive to one way or another, then the implication is that it can neither be good or bad. How all things quickly vanish, our bodies themselves lost in the physical world, the memories of them lost in time, the nature of all objects of the senses, especially those which allure us with pleasure, frighten us with pain, or enjoy the applause of vanity, how cheap they are, how contemptible, shoddy, perishable, and dead. And these are matters for our intellectual faculty to consider. We have the use of our bodies for a limited amount of time. Ultimately, we age, we decay, and we die. And then the memory of us will be held by the people who survive us, and then most of us, our memory will vanish into obscurity. Our names never to be uttered again. He's talking about the transience of things and how short-lived they are. And particularly when looking at impulses, the things that captivate our attention the most are often the most fleeting. If you think about anything which invokes an intensity of emotion, when someone pisses you off, when someone turns you on, when you're celebrating a moment of joy, when your team scores a goal in football, or a loss, or you're watching a film and there's a scary moment, there's a jump scare. These capture your attention in a vice-like grip and then let go seconds later as if they were never there. This is why at the peak of achievement, when athletes obtain the gold medal, the championship, whatever, they often descend into a long depression because what is there left for them to do? They've conquered the world. What is there left to conquer? And our brain is always looking to the next horizon. There is no fixed point. There is no final destination which we're trying to arrive at, which is why these emotions are so fleeting. And further considerations. What are they? These people whose judgments and voices confer or deny esteem. We often concern ourselves with the judgment of others. We're trying to win the approval of others. We seek status and popularity. And yet, whose opinions are we taking here? We're looking for the approval of others who will fade into obscurity just the same way that we will. And it'd be a bit of a depressing fact if you looked back at your life and thought, I always lived it in the way that person X would approve. It is death. Someone looking at death per se and applying the analytical power of his mind to divest death of its associated images will conclude then that it is nothing more than a function of nature, And if anyone is frightened of a function of nature, he is a mere child. And death is not only a function of nature, but also to her benefit. Further, how does a man touch God? With what part of his being? And when that part of him is in what sort of disposition? It reminds me of when Seneca's talking about death. He describes all of life as death. We tend to think of death as the final moment, but Seneca explains death is an ongoing process, which we are constantly in the process of. We are all dying every second. The final moment is just the conclusion of that process. We are on this journey all the time. Death is merely the arrival. And so it's nothing to fear. We're not afraid of our moment in this second and it's just gone. We all died a little bit more. We're not afraid of that part of death. Our fear is reserved only for the final element, which is irrational. Further, how does man touch God? With what part of his being? And then that part of him is in what sort of disposition? So Marcus here is reflecting a bit on the afterlife. I don't really know what his belief was in this, other than perhaps some sort of return to nature or a higher being, perhaps. But I think the reason he discards the body is because there's perhaps some belief that it's the soul that connects with God in the end. Nothing is more miserable than one who is always out and about, running round everything in circles. In Pindar's words, delving deep in the bowels of the earth, and looking for signs and symptoms to divine his neighbour's mind. He does not realise that it is sufficient to concentrate solely on a divinity within himself and to give it true service. That service is to keep it uncontaminated by passion, triviality, or discontent at what is dealt by gods or men. Not much has changed in 2,000 years. We're still running around trying to gain the approval of people we don't like. There's the old adage of, I think it was from Fight Club, we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And we're all caught up in this game. And there's almost an expectation to be seen to be busy all the time, to be grinding, hustling, whatever, to be concerning ourselves with the news and the latest developments. And a lot of it is for show, if we're to be frank. Does it really matter? And here Marcus advocates for moving away from all this trivial stuff. What comes from the gods demands reverence for their goodness. What comes from men is welcome for our kinship's sakes, but sometimes pitiable also in a way, because of their ignorance of good and evil. And this is no less a disability than that which removes the distinction of light and dark. So he's saying here that if something happens naturally, then we can take it as it is on its own merits. But what comes from a person who doesn't know right from wrong is, well, he's arguing here that they are blind, that they are no better than a blind man stabbing into the darkness. Even if you are destined to live 3,000 years or 10 times that long, nevertheless, remember that no one loses any life other than the one he lives, or lives any life other than the one he loses. It follows that the longest and the shortest lives are brought to the same state. It's worth remembering that when worrying about how long you may live, or someone else may outlive you or die and you think as they died before their time, but we all arrive at the same destination. Just some of us are heading there a bit faster than others. There's a good point here that your life is yours only. And I think that's a good one to remember when it comes to being jealous of other people's lives or wishing you had their life. You don't know what it's like to be them, and no one knows what it's like to be you. And even if you did, you can't live like them. You have your life, and that's the only thing that you do have. You've been dealt the cards you've been dealt, and now you have to play them. The present moment is equal for all, so what is passing is equal also. The loss, therefore, turns out to be the merest fragment of time, No one can lose either the past or the future. How could anyone be deprived of what he does not possess? The message here is about mindfulness. We only own the present moment. The past is already gone. We can't change what's happened. And the future has yet to happen. So that's also beyond our control. All we have control of is the current moment. This moment. That moment that's just gone now. And again, that's all we have. So always remember these two things. First, that all things have been of the same kind from everlasting, coming round and round again. And it makes no difference whether one will see the same thing for 100 years, or 200 years, or for an infinity of time. Second, that both the longest lived and the earliest to die suffer the same loss. It is only the present moment of which either stands to be deprived, and if indeed this is all he has, he cannot lose what he does not have. Yeah, I've got nothing more to say on that. You can't lose what you don't have. All is as thinking makes it. The retort made to Monimus the Cynic is clear enough. But clear too is the value of his saying, if one takes the kernel of it, as far as it is true. Exactly, things really are what you make of it. There's the idea of hedonic adaptation, where we get used to things and then we want them to improve. And then once that improvement happens, we're happy for a while and then we want more improvement. We all adapt to whatever circumstances we have. If the water gets cut off, we'll just be glad to have a shower. Once the water comes on, it would be preferable if the water could be a bit warmer. And we've already forgotten the previous state of when there was no water. So perspective on things and framing our current circumstances is very important for making a judgment on it, because ultimately, whatever judgment we decide to make, that is how we'll feel about it. The soul of a man harms himself first and foremost when it becomes, as far as it can, a separate growth, a sort of tumour on the universe, because to resent anything that happens is to separate oneself in revolt from nature, which holds in collective embrace the particular natures of all other things. Secondly, when it turns away from another human being, or is even carried so far in opposition as to intend him harm. Such is the case in the souls of those gripped by anger. I do wonder sometimes at people that can't control their temper. You're shouting into the wind. I mean, pissing into the wind, really. It doesn't change anything. It will change you. It will change how you feel. You'll feel worse. But giving into anger and being mad at the way things are is a waste of energy. That doesn't mean that you can't deliver consequences to something that you're not satisfied with, but you can do so rationally. A soul harms itself, thirdly, when it gives in to pleasure or pain, as we touched on before with Freud, either pursuing pleasure or avoiding pain are the two ways to control someone. Fourthly, whenever it dissimulates, doing or saying anything feigned or false. Fifthly, whenever it fails to direct any of its own actions or impulses to a goal, but acts at random, without conscious attention, whereas even the most trivial action should be undertaken in reference to the end. And the end for rational creatures is to follow the reason and the rule of the most venerable archetype of a governing state, the universe. Wrapped up in our day-to-day lives and hurrying about, we sometimes forget, what is it that we're trying to achieve here? What is our end goal? And when something is urgent or we spend a lot of time doing it, it creates the perception that it's worth doing, or it's important, or that it is what we should be functioning on. But is that the case? It's something to consider. Think about what it is that you want to do in life, and then think about what it is that you're doing now. And is there any correlation? I've asked myself this question many times, and I've not liked the answer that I've given myself. In man's life, his time is a mere instant, his existence a flux, his perception fogged, his whole bodily composition rotting, his mind whirligig, his fortune unpredictable, his fame unclear. To put it shortly, all things of the body stream away like a river, all things of the mind are dreams and delusion. Life is warfare, and a visit in a strange land. The only lasting fame is oblivion. Absolutely. If you think of all the people that are alive today, how consequential they may have believed their lives to be, they will eventually be forgotten. And the people who remembered them will be forgotten as well. And then on a long enough time frame, the Earth will go into the sun, and then the universe will contract on itself. To attribute so much importance to something like fame is a delusion, because it's something so temporary and fickle. What then can escort us on our way? One thing and one thing only: philosophy. Yeah, he's marking his own homework here, isn't he? Justifying dedicating his life to philosophy, perhaps. This consists in keeping the divinity within us inviolate and free from harm, master of pleasure and pain, doing nothing without aim, truth, or integrity, and independent of others' actions or failure to act. Further, accepting all that happens and is allotted to it as coming from that other source, which is its own origin. So he's not really talking about philosophy in the common sense that we think of: old men in togas with beards lounging about making lofty statements about things. He's talking about living with integrity and living up to your potential, speaking the truth. And also, ultimately, the fact that other people abdicate their responsibility does not give you an excuse to abdicate yours. You should still turn up regardless of what other people do. That's what he's getting at here. That's what Marcus believes when he talks about philosophy. And also, making peace with what happens and getting on with it, not dwelling on it or contemplating why has this bad thing happened. Instead, accept that this is life, these things happen, and at all times awaiting death with the glad confidence that it is nothing more than the dissolution of the elements of which every living creature is composed. Now, if there is nothing fearful for the elements themselves in their constant changing of each other into another, why should one look anxiously in prospect at the change and dissolution of them all? This is in accordance with nature, and nothing harmful is in accordance with nature. So he's finishing off here with the idea that if you think about the parts of the body, we are in a constant change and death. Our cells are regenerating, parts of our body are dying, our skin cells are dead, our neurons make new connections. If we're always in a state of change and parts of us are dying, what difference should it make if all of us dies at once? And as I said before, we're in this process all the time. What we commonly refer to as death is just the final moment of that process in change. So that's book 2 done. Thank you for listening to the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and hit the subscribe button. Be sure to check out my blog on spokengreats.com. and look forward to future episodes where we'll be looking at the remaining books in Meditations, but also other great ideas from great books. See you soon.